I returned to my grandmother's abandoned palace, 2 years after her passing. My return was not merely a visit to an old house, it was an escape from a present that was suffocating me. My family refused my marriage to the man I loved because they saw him as beneath our status. My heart was bleeding, and the family home had become a prison, reminding me of their disappointment in me. So I found no refuge except this ancient palace, where the walls know the secrets of generations, and where my grandmother had once been my only sanctuary. I entered her room, the room that still carried her faint scent and a silence heavy in the air. I knelt beside the bed, as if searching for something to console me. There, I noticed a wooden box covered with dust. With my trembling hand, I pulled it out and slowly opened it. Inside was an old book, and on its cover a single word in familiar handwriting: my life. I couldn't help myself. I sat on the floor and began turning its pages, and suddenly, the words were no longer just ink on paper. I heard my grandmother's voice emerging from between the lines, clear and deep, as if she had returned from the dead to tell me her secrets. I didn't know that the past I was fleeing to would reveal to me what I had never expected.
Here I am writing my memoirs. I named them My Life. After I became an old, lonely woman, my children left me, followed by my grandchildren, leaving this great palace filled with silence. I sat between its desolate walls, weighed down by the sickness and wounds of the years, wounds the long days never healed. I found no refuge except writing. I write to search for a remedy to ease my pain, and for a peace I might only find in confession. I write, hoping that my story will be a lesson for whoever reads it after my death. For those grandchildren I never dared to confide in. How could I confess? I was that aristocratic grandmother, strict and disciplined, a byword for self-control, feared by old and young alike. But behind this awe, I was always a woman carrying a heart pierced with secrets, silent wounds whose scars never healed, and desires suppressed in the name of duty and honor. Since my childhood, they told me I was lucky. Lucky because I belonged to a noble lineage and breathed within walls draped in gold and silk. But what kind of luck is this? What is the value of a cage if it's gilded? I was a prisoner in a house that dictated even my breathing. Everything in my life was imposed on me. When to wake up, how to sit, whom to meet, even whom I was allowed to smile at. I wasn't allowed to choose. Not my studies, not my life, not even my feelings. I would watch the world from the palace's high windows. Out there, beyond the guarded gates, people laughed, argued, loved, lived simply without protocols. I envied them and wondered secretly, when will I live? My second window to the world was the glass of the car that took me every day to the Music Institute, where I sat at the piano. Even that choice wasn't mine. It was imposed on me, like everything else. But that daily hour, the hour on the road, was like a sliver of light sneaking into my cell. From behind the glass, I saw bustling markets, alleys full of barefoot children, women carrying baskets of vegetables, lovers exchanging glances in haste. I lived those moments only with my eyes, while my heart longed to step out of the car, to run, to laugh, to lose itself in that simple world. As for the rest of my lessons in language, literature, and philosophy, The palace walls were my school, teaching me cold knowledge without soul. And so my life remained a closed circle, a palace that confined me from within, and a car that carried me to an hour of postponed freedom. I did not know that fate was listening to my questions in silence, and that it would answer me soon, but its answer would cost me my whole life. My family assigned me a private driver. His task was to take me to the Music Institute every day, then wait for me for hours until I finished, to return me to the palace. It wasn't my choice, but an imposition by my family, so I wouldn't mingle with the outside world more than necessary. A year and a half passed, and I lived this same routine. I left the palace walls, sat in the back seat like a princess in a glass cage, arrived at the institute, learned music under the eyes of teachers, then returned to my old place. Sometimes I felt the car was nothing but an extension of the palace, or perhaps its moving prison. Even when I looked from its window at the streets and markets, at laughing children or women shopping freely, I knew I was a stranger to it all. I saw them, but I wasn't one of them. And as the days passed, the driver's face became familiar in my life. He was silent, doing his duty regularly, never speaking. I didn't see him as more than a shadow accompanying me, but I didn't know that this shadow would soon become my only light in the darkness of my life. One day, while I was heading to a concert at the Institute, I was wearing a luxurious dress tailored especially for such occasions, a dress befitting the family's status and displaying the severity of its traditions. But as I stepped out of the car, I heard the sound of fabric tearing. I looked back and saw that the edge of the dress had caught in the door and ripped noticeably. I panicked. It was not a mere accident, but a real catastrophe. I knew my family would scold me harshly, and that the concert, where I was supposed to be a symbol of elegance, would turn into a cause for scandal. In our house, the simplest mistakes were considered a betrayal of tradition. I froze in place, tears about to fall. Suddenly, I heard a calm voice behind me. "Miss, don't worry. My mother is a skilled seamstress. If you allow me, we can stop by our house now, and she'll fix it for you in minutes. No one will ever know what happened." I froze even more. It was the first time I had heard his voice. A year and a half, he had been driving me to the Institute daily and back, without uttering a single word. I thought he was mute, or maybe he had chosen silence in the presence of family members. But his voice at that moment pierced my heart. It was warm, sincere, without pretension or fear, a simple tone. But to me, it was more precious than all the melodies of the Institute. I hesitated for a moment. How could I go to the driver's house? I, who had never entered a house outside the palace except for the Music Institute. But my fear of my family's wrath was stronger than any hesitation. I nodded in agreement, and that decision was the first step on a path I did not know would turn my life upside down. I agreed to his suggestion, and there I discovered a world I had never known, a small, modest home, but full of warmth and freedom. No servants, no protocols, no orders, only pure faces and genuine smiles. His mother welcomed me with a kindness I had never experienced in my life. She reached out her hand to take the dress, saying, "Don't worry, my daughter. In minutes, it will be as good as new." I trembled upon hearing the word, "my daughter." I had never heard it from my own mother, nor anyone in our cold palace. There I was, only ever the young lady. While his mother busied herself sewing, he gestured for me to step into his room to rest. I hesitated, then entered. The room was a different world. Scattered colors, brushes, papers, and paintings covering the walls. A beautiful chaos I had never seen before. Then I understood that his long silence concealed a creative soul brimming with life. He left me for a moment to bring a drink. My curiosity overcame me, so I approached his desk, opened a small drawer, and froze. There weren't just one or two drawings of me, but several, my face repeated in each one, but always different. Once laughing freely as I never had, once with dreamy eyes defying the horizon, as though I were a woman unchained. But the painting that shook me was hidden among the papers, a painting of the two of us sitting close by a small valley at sunset, his hand holding mine, my features glowing with serenity, a scene that had never happened in reality, but one that lived in his imagination. I quickly replaced the papers before he returned, but my heart was no longer the same. When he came back with his shy smile carrying a cup of tea, I no longer saw just a driver before me. I saw a man I felt I had known forever, a man my heart seemed to have loved for years without me realizing it. At that moment, I knew I had begun to feel real love for him, feelings I had never tasted before, but that swept over me with a force I could not resist. After his mother finished fixing the dress, we hurried back to the institute. I entered the concert as if nothing had happened, stood among my peers, while hiding within me an earthquake no one knew. I smiled and pretended to focus on the music, but my soul was still there, in the little room full of paintings, before the image of the sunset by the valley. The concert ended, and we returned to the palace. I entered through its heavy gate, and the creak of iron sounded as though it were closing doors on me that would never open. I was like a bird freed for a fleeting moment, spreading its wings, seeing the sky, only to be forced back into a golden cage. That cage was luxurious, glittering with furniture and ornaments, but a cage nonetheless. And from that night, I was no longer the same. I had seen freedom, touched love, and felt alive for the first time. But I also realized that my life from that day on would be nothing but a struggle between a heart yearning to fly and golden walls that would never show mercy. And so, after that day, I could no longer hide my feelings for him. The trip to the institute and back became the moments I lived for. No longer just a daily routine, but an appointment I counted down the hours for. And he was no longer as silent as before. I was the one who urged him to speak. I asked him about the names of neighborhoods we passed, about the markets and gardens, about anything visible from the car window. I made up questions just to hear his tender voice, the voice that had broken his long silence and captured me forever. How I longed to sit beside him in the front seat, close to him, without that formal distance separating us. But I remained in the back, stealing glances at his features through the rear-view mirror. Those glances I thought were hidden, but they betrayed me, revealing me, and perhaps I wanted him to see them. I wanted him to glimpse in my eyes my interest, so he would know I no longer saw him as a driver, but as a man who possessed my heart. We stayed like that for a whole week. Stolen glances, small questions I made up just to hear his voice. I returned every night to my room, clutching my heart as if it would leap from my chest, until the day came when I could no longer bear my silence. I decided to be brave. I sat at night and wrote a short letter, trembling words, but honest as my heart. I no longer see you as a driver. You have become something much greater in my life. The next morning, when he dropped me at the institute, I pretended to hurry out. At the last moment, I tossed the letter through the car window onto his seat. Then I ran away, climbing the institute steps as if fleeing a crime. I sat in the music hall, but I heard nothing of what they played. My ears waited for his footsteps. My eyes searched for his features among the melodies. I was consumed only by imagining his reaction. Would he ignore me? Would he be angry? Would he abandon his duty as the family's driver? I felt such shame. How could I face him after class? How could I look into his eyes after throwing my heart into his hands? That day was the longest day of my life. When the music class ended, I was trembling with tension. I approached the institute door slowly, as if walking toward an inevitable fate. There he was waiting for me, standing by the car as usual, but his features were not as I had known them. His face was more serious, his eyes fixed on me intently. I approached him hesitantly. He opened the car door for me in silence, but I felt that this silence was not like before. It was a charged silence. I got in and sat in the back seat as protocol demanded, but he did not start the car immediately. He remained standing for a moment, his hand on the door. Then he leaned slightly and said in a low voice, "I received your letter." My hands shook, and I lowered my head in shame. I couldn't utter a word. He sat behind the wheel, started the engine slowly, and the car moved. The road remained silent for long moments, until I thought I had lost him, that he would reject me or refuse me. But suddenly, I heard his voice whisper, "Miss, your words are not easy. You know that what lies between us is impossible." Tears gathered in my eyes, but I dared to say, "Perhaps it is impossible, but I can no longer stay silent." He paused for seconds. Then I looked at the car's mirror. My eyes met his. It was a look longer than all words, the look of a man who had not yet confessed, but had not denied either. And from that moment, the silence between us was no longer the same. After that confrontation, it was no longer possible to return to our first silence. I felt that something had broken, or perhaps something more beautiful had been born. We began exchanging letters in secret. I wrote him short words on a small piece of paper and left it in the rear drawer of the car. And when I returned, I found his reply hidden under the seat or in the door pocket. Simple letters, but they lit up my nights. Your smile today made me forget my fatigue. When we passed through the market and I saw you looking from the window, I wished you could walk among the people freely. Every day I see you, I grow more certain that I am living a dream. As for me, I wrote to him with a boldness I had never known in myself. When I look into the mirror, I don't see my image. I look for your eyes. Your voice, which you think is ordinary, is my true music. Do you know, when your hand touches mine as I get out of the car, I feel the whole world disappear. Every letter was like a secret embrace, every paper like a heartbeat we shared, far from others' eyes. I lived on those moments. I read his words over and over until I memorized them by heart. We did not need long meetings, nor public confessions. The letters were enough for us. Letters between the lines, yet deeper than all the words ever said to me in my life. But dreams do not last long. Life always finds a way to put obstacles before us. By bad luck, my younger sister had recently joined the same institute. From that day, she began accompanying me in the car morning and evening. At first, it seemed ordinary, but little by little, I realized her presence was stealing from me the most precious thing I had, our small moments. I could no longer ask him the names of neighborhoods or start a conversation to hear his voice. I was forced into silence, while my sister filled the air with her innocent questions and laughter. What hurt me most was that I could no longer see him through the mirror. The front seat had become hers, and I was now behind her, watching him from afar like a stranger. Matters worsened when she began noticing my confusion. One day she whispered to me with wounding innocence, "Sister, why do you look at him so much?" I froze and feigned a laugh, but my heart trembled. I knew that her observation could turn into a thin thread connecting to the entire family. From then on, our love was no longer as hidden as it had been. The third eye that accompanied us every day was enough to threaten our secret at any moment. And one day, we were all at the lunch table, the whole family. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the time no one ever missed. A long table, dishes neatly arranged, glasses shining, and the usual solemn silence hanging in the air. While we ate, my little sister spoke with cruel innocence. "Sister, what did the driver write to you on the paper he gave you this morning?" Silence fell, and hands froze mid-motion. I felt my heart stop, my eyes fixed on the plate before me. My father exploded with an angry voice. "What paper?" My older brother stood up and struck the table with his fist. "To your room, now." A harsh dragging, a meticulous search of my room, until they found what I had feared they would find. The driver's letters I had hidden between the pages of books. I could not dispose of them. They were part of my being. Then, the most dangerous letter, the one I had written in my own hand the previous night, where I invited him to run away with me, to marry, and live where no one knew us. It was my boldest letter and my most reckless. My father stood holding the letter, his eyes sparking. He said with deadly sternness, he toyed with her, corrupted her mind, and exploited her innocence. My older brother added, all the responsibility is on him. He must pay the price. They did not shout at me much. They did not blame me directly. They decided I was just a victim, and that the whole crime belonged to him. He is at fault. He is the culprit. He is the one who will be punished. The worst part was that until that very moment, he did not know the family had discovered our secret. He thought we were still safe, while they were laying a trap for him in silence. That evening, I was confined to my room, my heart pounding violently since the moment the letters were discovered. I tried to write, to cry, to find an escape, but everything seemed blocked. Suddenly, I heard commotion downstairs. Rushed footsteps, men's voices, a tense murmur. I left my room in confusion, and descended the stairs slowly until I reached the hall. There, I found the police standing before my father, one officer speaking seriously. "Sir, a short while ago your gold watch was found among the driver's belongings." I almost screamed. That watch, which had been reported missing a few hours earlier, suddenly appears among his things. I knew, deep inside, I knew it was all a trap. They had fabricated the charge carefully to close the story and fold up the scandal. I felt the ground sway beneath me. I saw in my father's eyes the glint of cruel triumph, and on my brother's face a cold relief. As for me, I remained silent, helpless, shackled by my fear. I did not dare say a word. Had I spoken, their wrath would have fallen upon me as well. I stood watching, while the only man I had ever loved in my life was led to a dark fate he did not deserve. Soon after, they brought him in. I was trembling behind a marble column in the hall, watching the scene as fear devoured me. The driver entered flanked by 2 policemen, his hands shackled in front of him. His face was pale, his eyes bewildered, as one who had suddenly fallen into a nightmare with no beginning or end. I heard him cry out in supplication, "I am innocent. I swear I didn't steal anything. I never touched anyone's watch." But my father's voice was decisive, allowing no argument. "The evidence doesn't lie. He betrayed our trust and received his due." He tried to look around them, and when his eyes met mine, I felt time stop. It was a long, heavy look, full of questions. It said, "You are the only one who knows my innocence. Why are you silent?" I wanted to scream, to run to him, to tell them he was not a thief, but a lover. But I remained rooted, my feet planted in the ground as if shackled like him. Only a muffled gasp escaped my mouth as I watched them lead him out of the palace. That scene haunted me all my life. His last look was my eternal shame. From that moment, I knew I had lost the only man I loved and lost myself with him. Not many days passed before his trial session was held. Everything was decided before it began, for my family's influence was stronger than any defense, and my father's word heavier than any justice. The judge did not see an innocent man. He saw a simple driver who dared to approach where he should not. The sentence was harsh, 10 full years behind bars. That day, I felt as though a sword had pierced my chest, but I had no power except silence. I was trapped between my father's and brother's gazes and by my own shameful helplessness. 6 years passed on him in prison, years of silence and brokenness. His behavior was so good that even his jailer bore witness to him, and for that, they released him early. But freedom was not free. They forced him to sign another sentence, a vow never to return to his city as long as he lived. He was exiled far away, as though they wanted to bury him alive in eternal exile. When I heard of his release, my heart beat again for a moment, but it soon shattered once more, for he left far away, and the door between us closed forever. They did not even grant me time to grieve. Only weeks after his imprisonment, they forced me into marriage with a man of our class, a wealthy businessman and a prominent politician, a member of parliament. He treated me kindly, but I was with him only in body, not in spirit. I smiled at formal banquets, played the role of the perfect wife, while my heart remained imprisoned. I moved with him to his grand palace in the heart of the city. High walls, guards at the gates, a life filled with empty appearances. In my first year, I bore my first child, followed by 2 more sons and a daughter. They all grew under the shadow of the strict family, carrying its name and pride, while inside, I was silently crumbling. The years passed, and secretly, I sought any trace of him. I followed the echoes of his life through crooked channels, hiding behind masks of social curiosity or charity work. I never dared to approach him directly, knowing that one reckless step could mean his end. Then his memory vanished entirely. He left for another city, and no one spoke of him again. As for me, I lived on fragments of memories, clinging to them like a breath of oxygen in a locked room. With time, I turned into a strict mother, and later, a rigid grandmother. I repeated with my children and grandchildren what was done to me. Rules, appearances, traditions. I raised my voice at them, hid my tears, and appeared as an unbreakable wall. Yet inside, I remained a trembling bird searching for an open window every night, never finding one. After my husband's death, I grew harsher still, as though I were the last guardian of the family's name and image. But the truth is, I was only a weak woman, afraid to face herself. And today, all that remains for me are these memoirs. I write them with a trembling hand, not for anyone else, but for myself, to confess the secret I have buried for decades. My eldest son was not my husband's child. He was the driver's son, the only man I truly loved. A few days before his trial, we met in secret. In a moment of weakness, I conceived his child. When they forced me into marriage, I was already carrying that secret in my womb. Everyone believed the child to be the fruit of my marriage. Even my husband never doubted, but I knew his blood flowed in him. No one ever knew, not my father, not my brothers, not even my husband. Even he, the driver, died in exile, broken, never knowing he had a son whose blood runs inside this palace. That was the cause of his tragedy.
I could not remain a prisoner of these pages. My search led me to a faraway city. I knocked on the door of an old house, and an elderly woman opened, his sister. After a long struggle between my insistent questions and her cautious silence, she finally broke down and told me the truth. She told me their mother had died of a heart attack just days after his imprisonment, her heart shattered with grief. She said he was released broken, never married, and lived with her until his death 3 years ago. Then she led me to his room and gave me a wooden box he had left behind. I opened it with trembling hands and found my grandmother's letters, still preserved, their words faded with time, yet burning with love. Beside them lay a drawing he made with his own hand. The river, the same river my grandmother described in her diaries. The river that remained witness to a love that lived in the shadows and died in silence. My tears fell on the letters and the picture. Then I realized that the truth they tried to bury had never died. It lived here, in the letters of a broken woman, in the room of an exiled man, and in my own blood.